The Tree of Life is a place where people can come and reconnect with nature, reconnect with themselves, and it's usually a place where when they are there at the Tree of Life, there is a kind of a correspondence with the environment and perhaps the people that are also there, maybe in a workshop or in a retreat or something like that. Or if they come and just be there and be part of a work exchange, or just being there on their own if they decide to do that. It was originally designed for that purpose, to reconnect people to life, nature, and themselves.
The concept of the Tree of Life and the vision of the Tree of Life started with a vision quest in Conn River with Chief Missile Joe, and from that the design of the Tree of Life manifested. So it started as the concept was 3 octagonal pods that were joined together by a central building, the pods being workshop spaces. And the central building that I designed, I found out in hindsight, was the shape of the Tree of Life, or Kabbalah, which is an aspect of sacred geometry. It was a vision of a retreat center, and I guess my vision, or my component of that, was the building and design of it, and Meranda Squires was bringing to that the community aspect, the spiritual teaching aspect of it. So the two of us together, it was a collective vision.
And I'm already, I work with people. I work in workshops and retreats, and my vision has always been to be in a long-term retreat with people and to work with people in a very, very deep way. And of course, the environment, the place, is really important for that, because if they're distracted in the city, they can't go deep because they got this and that and whatever that has to be done. So when we're in a retreat space, then there's an opportunity to go deeper and to let go, let go, let go. And that's the purpose of a retreat. So our discussion started early on in our relationship, and he had this piece of land that his father had, and he just made that decision. And with the two of us together, we were like magnets kind of working on this idea. He would do the actual physical building of the retreat, and I was the one that brought the people, and we kept the space going so people would come and just go out there and work, and we would have our meditations and we'd have our yoga out there. So it was a fun type of working. It was community. My vision was always community. Since I came from India and I lived in a community, we're supported in the growth, the personal growth in a community. And so that was when I came back from India. I thought, well, that's all I want, and I know how to do it. I know how to be with people. And so then the Tree of Life came, well, let's create community in nature. So it wasn't just nature, but it was community. So we're learning how to relate to each other and raise each other in a vibration of higher consciousness. So we just got those two ideas together, and because they were two powerful truths, one was building a retreat and the other is building community, boom, came together.
In 1992, I moved out to British Columbia, and I lived on an island there, Galliano Island, and built a house. And I met my building guru there, Stuart Jackson, and I became more versed in post and beam construction. But in 1997, I went through a relationship meltdown, and I ended up right back in Newfoundland. But eventually my father offered me a parcel of land here in the Salmonier Valley. He had a 24-acre block of land here. I should add too that I lived here on the adjacent 21-acre block of land, which I owned right up to the 1992 for 15 years. So when my dad offered me a piece of his original parcel of land, it was like a homecoming. It was a realization that really I was meant to come back here, and this is my place. So I spent all my childhood in Salmonier. Property was being divided amongst the siblings, the larger parcel, 24 acres, but all my siblings were interested primarily in the pieces near the road with frontage, etc. But I knew this property well because for 15 years I lived out here and I hiked through this forest, and I knew this was a special area up here. So I selected out this parcel of 5 acres of land, and very carefully, and it was kind of an easy parcel for me to acquire, in the sense I didn't have any arguments from my siblings, because it was 500 meters from the main road. So the Tree of Life is nestled into this highly productive forest, which is protected because of the valley, and we're really blessed because we have 300 meters away we have a waterfalls. We have a river that comes down and meets the Salmonier River, and it's got multiple falls and pools on it, and we have a beautiful swimming hole under the main falls, and that's very, very popular.
The environment of the Tree of Life is an actual perfect environment because you have the elements and you have the spiritual calling of the divine to come down and meet us here on earth in nature. And this combination is what creates the magic attraction to transform the consciousness into something that a person is wanting and needing in their own personal life. people need this. I need it. I did it for myself. Ian did it for himself, but I know that he and I are in common with everyone else. They need it too. We all need this. So it was building over the years. So here it is, 2020. We started it in 2005 or 6, and it's been building regularly in very different forms, but it's now, as far as I'm concerned, a retreat center, and still building.
The first building actually that was built on the Tree of Life was the meditation hut, and that's almost out of sight from the main building now. But it was a 10 by 10 structure with a loft and a small deck. And this was a little kind of living area that I also have been introduced to out in British Columbia. Very small space, but can be very efficient. But I lived out of that for 4 years while I was building some of the other buildings here. Well, the main building is the centerpiece of the Tree of Life. It's built in a three-dimensional Kabbalah, which is sacred geometric pattern. And one of the main features of it is it's all, primarily anyway, recycled old growth lumber, which came from old buildings in St. John's and other areas of the Avalon Peninsula. This would have been wood that came across the railway right across Canada from the west coast of North America 100 plus to 150 years ago. I got to know what this lumber was and how to recognize it, and so I was scouting around St. John's, and I knew from the model of the building that I developed what my lumber needs were. And so I would go on site wherever a building was being torn down and assess what was in there and what I might bargain for. An important aspect about the construction of the Tree of Life, and actually it's not really something that came to me with the Tree of Life itself, but I think especially when I got close with my building guru out in BC, I came to understand that building really is an art. It's a form of art, the way things can be put together to become pleasing and sort of functional, and there's a lot of subtlety that can go on in building that doesn't necessarily get caught by the human eye, but gets more felt when people kind of go into a building. What happened when I was in BC and I met my building guru, Stuart, is we became very close friends, and he came up with a design for the post and beam house that, I should say he built it, because he really did build it. I would say we built it. I helped, but it was his design. I have to credit him with that. This was in British Columbia on Galiano Island. But I was working on birds then. I was a research scientist. And one of the things that happened through this relationship with Stuart is he also became a field assistant working on birds with me, and quite loved it, and was incredibly good at that. But anyway, when it came to the building of the house, he said, "Ian, I have this idea of designing the house in the shape of a bird." And I was like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I got a whole kind of idea of how we could build that." But it made me realize that building really is an art. So when it came to building the Tree of Life, I applied a lot of what I'd learned with Stuart to the building. And so a lot of the features inside, you will find curved beams. Every beam in the Tree of Life has a routered edge. So there's actually no real sharp edges to any of the beams. And that's like a subtle thing, and it's one of those things that a person going in there wouldn't necessarily see. Maybe an experienced builder would, but it creates an effect, and the effect is, I think, a lot to do with the way the energy moves in the building. Because of a rounded surface, the energy flows better. And so there's just these aspects of building that is really about an art. And so when you're building, it's about putting love into the building, because it's actually what's happening as you start to put these pieces of the puzzle together. There's like a whole feeling to that. It's like the perfect fit when, say, a beam meets a post, and it inserts into that post, and it inserts into that post in such a perfect way that it's seamless and it joins together, and there's a perfection in that. And all of that gets captured in a true building project. So it really is a project of love. And then, of course, it accumulates as the building manifests and gets larger and larger and larger. And then behind me is a masonry wood heating unit built with a firebox and multiple chambers that the smoke has to travel through, so that all the heat is removed or absorbed by the brick. And the fire is lit, and maybe 4 or 5 loads of wood, 4 or 5 hours of burning. Then all of the intake and exhaust after the fire is burnt out are all closed up. And then the structure puts out heat for about 24 hours. This particular structure has 6,000 bricks in it. And all this brick is recycled, and most of it came from the old arcade store down on Water Street in St. John's, which I had to bring out in my old van, 300 bricks at a time, because that's all it could carry in a load. Also, what I've done in addition to that is all of the basement floor, which is a 4-inch concrete slab, has buried in it a 1/2-inch water line. And so the wood heating unit, I've adapted it so that the oven now has a water tank, and it heats water, and that water goes by thermosiphon and gets accumulates and circulates through this bathtub on top of the wood heating unit, and then it's cycled down and passed through a heat exchanger, which interfaces with the liquid in the pipe that's in the basement floor. And so then that heats and stores that heat in the basement floor. And again, the basement floor is a concrete slab. So it soaks up the heat, but then it gives it back very, very slowly. So things that I might do to also profile the sacred geometry will be adding geometric patterns to the doors. I have one door that has the pentagram and pentangles, and that's the pentagram and pentangles is a feature of the golden ratio, which goes on for infinity. Like there's the pentagram, there's the pentangle that forms inside of it, then there's another pentagram inside that, and another pentangle inside of that, pentagram, pentangle, on to infinity. It's an amazing pattern. And then the Templar's cross, the Freemasons, the pattern on the basement door, and so that's an aspect of sacred geometry. We have a reoccurring pentangle within pentangle pebble mosaic in the ground up near the fire pit. And so one definition of sacred geometry is omnipresent principles of the universe. So these are just geometric shapes that reoccur over and over and over in nature. Or another way of looking at it is all of nature is built with these geometric patterns. Maybe the simplest example of that might be a snowflake, which is going to be some aspect of a hexagram, of a six-sided figure. Most things that I'm doing now, building-wise, I try to incorporate sacred geometry into it. Like we are actively looking at an artist's studio, and we're looking at a sacred geometric design for that. The yoga studio is a special building because it started with an outside deck. Meranda wanted an outside space to have yoga in summer, and so we built an outside deck suitable for yoga, and that was fine. But of course in Newfoundland you can never depend on weather. So eventually I made a decision, okay, well I'm going to put a roof over it. And so then I didn't put just an ordinary roof over it. I had to do something pretty funky with it. So I went out and cut trees that were bent and branched, and came up with some nice, interesting looking trees or trunks to support the roof. Put the roof on it and tried to make it a little bit of a Shinto Japanese effect, so that the eaves curled upward, or turned out anyway. So that worked. That created a little bit more protection for the yoga studio, but it still wasn't that suitable. So what happened was the Lexar, which is the plexiglass that's now in the walls of the yoga studio, showed up in the Buy and Sell magazine. and at an incredible price, because this stuff is incredibly expensive, like $400 to $500 for 4 by 8 foot sheet. But anyway, 13 sheets of it showed up in the Buy and Sell magazine at about 40% of the retail cost. So bought it all and then built the walls. So it all kind of happened sort of progressively without any intent to be that way, and it was a challenging structure because of that. It's much better when you're building to know you're going to eventually have a roof on it and walls in it, as opposed to trying to put all these things together after the fact. But it's still one of the favorite structures here. People just love it. Yeah, the Cedar Lodge is a special building. So when I was collecting and you know, really searching for recycled timbers, I got to know 2 or 3 of the people that were in that business in eastern Newfoundland. And so I would get a call on occasion from one of these people and say, yeah, you know, we're taking down a building in such and such a place, and I think there's some BC wood in it. That's what they would say. And so I said, yeah, we're taking down this building, the old Pentecostal church out on Ropewalk Lane, and I think there's some BC wood in it. You better come out here and have a look. And so I drove out there, you know, and right away, and when I got there, I went, you know, I was like, oh my jumpins, it's old growth, 3 by 6, double tongue and groove, red cedar. I mean, that's probably one of the most expensive wood there is, you know, to buy for construction now. And you can't even get old growth red cedar anymore. And I got pretty excited, but I had to kind of contain myself so that they didn't know I was so excited. But yeah, I bought everything they had there, everything that came out of it. And so the cedar building is built with it. And because of the 3 by 6 size, could kind of make a stacked wall, as much like you would with a log cabin. So you just kind of stack one on top of the other on top of the other. The original intent of the cedar building was for it to be a sauna and shower building for the retreat facility. But I don't think that will ever happen now. And since that time, it's kind of moved through being the kitchen area. It was about 3 years. It was the kitchen and main kind of social hub for the Tree of Life when we were here working and stuff. And there's been 2, 3 tenants in there for a winter or 2. And I've spent probably 2 winters there myself. And now we post it on Airbnb, and it's extremely popular as a mindful accommodation in nature. And more and more we're seeing that that's an important aspect of what we can offer here at the Tree of Life. Kind of a special place where people can come and kind of get off the grid and have good contact with nature. And if they want, they can participate in any of the activities that might be going on, if there's yoga or meditation. The bunkhouse, we needed to have a place to house our workaways, and of course ultimately to house retreat participants. And when we started, we only had a tarped structure. We were, had people in a tarped structure with a wood stove set up. It was pretty cozy. And for a while, really, the tarp structure was also a kitchen for the Tree of Life. But eventually it became obvious that it had to build something more substantial. And that's sort of when the bunkhouse was started. And the bunkhouse is a nice building because all of the structure of that bunkhouse, except for probably some of the final finishing wood inside, all of that came from the forest here. And we had a major hurricane in 2011 that blew down a lot of the old growth forest around the Tree of Life. So we used all of that, milled a lot of that in the sawmill to build the bunkhouse. So one of the things that evolved at the Tree of Life was started to recognize that we could get helpers from out of province, more so out of country. The initial sort of program that offered that was called WWOOFing, Willing Workers on Organic Farms. And so it evolved. That website got very active, and we became aware of it. Actually, the organic farm out in Portugal Cove was hosting woofers, and some of those woofers ended up coming here, and we quickly realized that this was an important program because these are people that want to travel to other countries, other provinces, and gain experience in projects that are going on, and while at the same time increasing their life experiences. So we started to advertise on woofers, but then woofers, and woofers still is active, but it's primarily farming, organic farming, and we do some organic gardening, but we're not really in that on an operational level. But 2 other sites evolved. One was called Workaways, workaway.com, and the other one's Helper Exchange, helperx.net. And so these are sites where people that are looking to travel for their labor, they get room and board. And we've been advertising on those sites since 2007, I think. And quite frequently we have people here under those programs, and they've done a tremendous amount of work in helping out at the Tree of Life. We have a certain component of friends and other contacts, local contacts that come fairly regularly, and on occasion we can call on them to help out. So the Tree of Life is off the grid. We produce all our own electricity on site. We are operating in 3 modalities. We have micro hydro, which is water-based generation using a micro turbine, which is our largest source of electricity. So the micro hydro system is set up based on gravity feed, and we have a dam that holds back water, which is about 120 feet to 40 meters higher in elevation than the Tree of Life. And this creates the gravity feed and pressure needed to drive the mini turbine down at the power shed. So what's beautiful about micro hydro in general is that it's producing electricity all day and all night and every day that it's in operation. We do have some solar panels, and of course, by nature, solar panels only work when the sun is out, and so one of the drawbacks of using solar as a alternative energy is that when you need the electricity most, i.e. in winter, is when you have the least amount of light and the shortest days of the year. But we also have a wind turbine, and in Newfoundland we have a tremendous amount of wind, and so a wind turbine is also a very high production of alternative energy in Newfoundland. But right now we're working with the 3 modalities. We have to close down the micro hydro once the colder weather starts, because there's risks then of freeze up. And so for the actual deeper winter, we would be reliant primarily on the wind turbine with some offset from the solar panels. So the energy that's produced is stored in a battery bank. We use lead acid batteries. They would be the same as what's in a car, for example. We have a battery bank that is set up at 24 volts, and it's able to store a significant amount of energy and then hold a constant charge of electricity to the inverter, which turns the 24 volts into standard 120 volts, which is what households are using in North America. Up to 2013, the Tree of Life was essentially in my name. The property was, because I acquired the 5 acres from my father. But I started to realize that putting all this energy and surrendering myself into this project, and Miranda's surrendering into this project, it really would be a terrible loss if, for whatever reason, if one or both of us died. And I strongly felt that I needed to do something with the property that ensured that it would last for perpetuity. So we incorporated it as a not-for-profit under the Provincial Corporations Act. So that has a very defined set of bylaws or constitution, which defines its relative use and how it's governed. Essentially, once it's created as a not-for-profit, it can never really go back to not being a not-for-profit. If everyone that's involved with it at the director level were to disappear, and it didn't have sort of an operational basis, it would still have to be subsumed by some other not-for-profit entity of like-minded interest. So it was a way to ensure that the investment and love that's poured in here stays here.
Yeah, so in the last few years, the Tree of Life has never really been profitable for us. It's really been a work of art and a work of love. So, and it's art is everywhere, all over the place. People come and they do their pieces of art, and the energy that they put into their building and contribution is really coming from their heart in a big way. But we've never, it's funny, but we never thought of a business plan. It's not a business, right? So we didn't think from that. We didn't come from that place. So it's only in the last couple of years, and also the buildings haven't really been fully ready. So the facilities are now ready, and we've turned one building, the Cedar building, into an Airbnb. And it's been going for a couple of years. We have another building, the Bunkhouse, and that can be part of the Airbnb, and we're going to be adding to the meditation hut, which was the original building on the property. So there are Airbnb buildings available for people to come and really appreciate and just do their own thing. Yeah, the offerings that we have going on there at the Tree of Life I wanted it for my own retreat center, so I'm offering a lot of stuff. But it's a retreat center to rent out facilities for people as well, so people can come and offer their retreats there. So the types of retreats that I offer are meditation retreats, yoga teacher training retreats, enlightenment intensive retreats. And they can be from 2 weeks to 1 week to a weekend, sometimes just a one-day workshop. I've done past life regression sessions there. I've done yoga diet cleansing workshops. And other people will come and they could do art retreats there, they could do writing retreats there, they can do if they're a yoga teacher, then they can hold their own. We've had addictions type of retreats, people coming and someone else hosting it and giving it. I've also given some of those retreats. We've had ceremonial type retreats. People come during full moon and do retreats. Yeah, anybody can come and reserve a weekend and do a workshop there. The space, it's the actual in nature, the environment, the ability to relate to nature and call the divine down into ourselves while we're in these workshops. The recipe of the elements and everything come together so perfectly for what a person wants to create in their workshops.
Well, there's a lot of moose in Newfoundland in general. I have to confess, like as a scientist, I'm not very inspired by moose because it's an introduced species to Newfoundland, and like many introduced species, it has caused a lot of damage to the forest ecosystem, and some of that damage is threatening the balsam fir species, which is such an important component of the fog forest. It's called, or it's been named the fog forest because apparently, on average, the Avalon forest has about 200 days of fog. Now that doesn't mean completely blanketed in fog, but practically every morning when you get up here at the Tree of Life, the Salmonier Valley is full of fog, and then it slowly drifts out. But this fog forest plays an extremely important role for lichens, globally rare lichens that grow on trees. So the focus of the Tree of Life is toward spiritual development, and we have hosted a lot of different activities here, reflecting back, for example, on the water shaman Mandaza who came, and we had 50 people participate in a workshop. We all hiked to the hidden waterfalls and had a major day with a lot of powerful activity. On occasion, we offer a hot hut ceremony, which is like a sweat lodge, we would do this once a year sometimes, like on a fall equinox. Earlier on we were doing it multiple times during the year, but now it tends to be once a year or once every 2 years. So we have kind of a broad cross-section of things that may occur here. So it's a very special place in Newfoundland. We're in a deep river valley, the Salmonier River Valley, and the forest here is a yellow birch balsam fir forest. And yellow birch is a rare species in Newfoundland. It doesn't show up in a lot of the island shows up in sort of deep valleys along the south coast of the province. But it's a very special tree because it lives for centuries. And it hasn't been worked on, but I'm kind of speculating that some of these trees on the property here are 400 to 500 years old at least. One of the things we're discovering with yellow birch is that it almost never dies. Even when it blows down, it just kind of regrows from horizontal position even sometimes. So you get these trees, and you can see some of them around the property here that are horizontal and have started to grow vertical again. Or in some cases you can see the central trunk where the original tree was, and that all died and fell off, and then the branches that were left are now full trees. Three years ago, we developed a little 3-kilometer fog forest trail so that people that were interested in not only going to the waterfalls could also opt to do a circuit and experience the actual forest itself and come back to the property here. Well, we put signage. We've put some signage out. We put some arrows there, and we use surveyor's flagging tape. Probably every 20-30 meters, we have some orange flagging just to make sure that it's obvious which way to go. I mean, it is remote behind the Tree of Life, and you could walk for probably 4 or 5 hours before coming across any roads or human activity. So it's important that people not go astray when they're up there walking. But we haven't had any problems like that. So right now, Newfoundland, the island of Newfoundland, and particularly areas like the Salmonier River Valley, support species of lichens that are essentially not found anywhere else in the world. Or if they are in other areas of the world, they're extremely endangered and likely to go extinct. It's best to think about these ultra-rare lichens as indicators of the biodiversity of the forest. Basically, as a forest gets disturbed by human activity, particularly at an industrial level, where we're talking about clear cutting, all of these species disappear, and really once they're gone, there's no way that they can be recovered. So these species only thrive in a natural forest. I mean, tomorrow's medical cure could come from one of those species.
Well, one thing I will say is that we're following our intuition on this. It's a divine intuition project. And so it's constantly listening to being guided from beyond, from the divine. So, and everyone is part of that. So whoever comes, they contribute to that intuitional development of connecting with the divine. Everyone contributes. So everyone's presence who has been there is marked in the land and in the buildings. It's really gorgeous. And I personally am in such gratitude for all the people who have come and contributed to to the building of the place. I'm in gratitude with my own process that has occurred for me during the building of this, and the letting go and the creation. So there's both the creating and the letting go. Both happen there, and that is life. That is the tree of life. So my conclusion is that I invite people to come and check it out. You're welcome to participate in a workshop, or to come as an Airbnb, or to come as someone who wants to come through work exchange or some kind of barter of some sort. We're open to all of it because everyone contributes to the big picture. And the big picture is that we are all connected in this one glorious soup of truth.